Hello and welcome back to the Creative Journal podcast. Today's guest, Mr. Jeremy Slagle. I've been looking forward to this episode for a really long time, and if you can't tell by how nervous I am in this episode, well, I hope you enjoy. So a little background, Jeremy has ran a successful design studio since 2009. He has done branding and design for many well-known and recognizable institutions in the Ohio Midwest, such as Cedarville and Capital Universities, Tiffin University, and Worcester College, just to name a few. He has done several collaborations and talks with Adobe and other well-known venues, sharing his knowledge and career experiences with aspiring youth. He's truly a role model to me, and many in the Ohio Midwest know him for his work. He currently runs Slagle Design Studio with his wife and 2 children in Clinton, Ohio. They continue to work in tandem to create more memorable projects to impact others. You can find them at www.slagledesign.com, as he prefers for you to find him, because in his own words, he does not do social media, as you will find. Personally, I don't think it goes without saying, Jeremy is a huge role model of mine. That'll become pretty clear. As I said, I was pretty nervous. I really admire his, approach to work, the pride he takes in his projects, his sense of self, and how he really wants to give back. He even does one-on-one portfolio reviews with, aspiring designers, people my age, and he just really wants to give back in any way he can. And I so look up to this guy, and for him to make the time to talk to me today, really, really made my day, and I can't say that enough. In this episode, expect to learn Jeremy's life story, finding your sense of self as a designer, how you show your value to people you want to work with, and much more. So without further ado, please welcome Mr. Jeremy Slagle.
Okay.
So I'm going to try and encompass your life story as good as I can from what I've gathered from all of your content so far. And then you kind of fill in the gaps if and when I mess it up. Does that sound good to start?
That works fine with me. 49 years worth of information. You've figured it all out. I'm interested in hearing what you came up with.
Cool. Okay. So you did design growing up in high school. You did a lot of volunteer work for your community, your school. Your father was a basketball coach. Your mother, she worked in a design studio. Is that correct?
She was mostly a stay-at-home mom because my dad was a private Christian school teacher and basketball coach. We didn't make a lot of money. So in the summers and while we were in school, she took on a part-time job running a stat camera for a design agency in Detroit. Yeah.
Okay, cool. And also you have to forgive me too, because I'm training for a marathon and I have,
oh, wow.
Thanks. But I have a playlist with all of your content from all the episodes with all your podcast episodes from the past several years, and that's been my training soundtrack. So
oh, wow,
it's just associated with existential pain in my head. You have to forgive me.
You're not the only one, apparently. So I think we're good. Talk to my wife. No, I'm kidding. My kids might say something too. I don't know.
Yeah, I was actually I work here at Rudis in Marysville, Ohio.
Okay.
It's a wrestling apparel company, and I'm one of the graphic designers. I just got hired. I'm 22 years old. And so I probably should introduce myself first. I'm sorry. I was just really excited to talk to you, but I work here in Marysville, Ohio. It's about 30 minutes or so from Columbus, from your neck of the woods. And I think one of the designers, I was actually just talking to her this morning. I was telling the team that I was interviewing you, and her name's Molly. I don't know. I remember her last name, but she said she went to school with your daughter.
Okay.
So I'm not sure the connection there, but
yeah.
She went to CCAD, and actually a lot of the designers on staff here went to CCAD. So
okay.
Except me, but
very cool. Yeah.
But let's talk about you.
Okay.
So, and then you did a lot of work in high school. And you ended up working at a bakery, I think is right. And then as you're working at a bakery, your dad found in the newspaper, a job working for a screen print company. and you did a lot of work for them. And even though you didn't have a college degree, you kind of worked your way and you learned everything about printing, and you worked that job for a while, and that led to a job. I think it was a video production house, right?
Yeah, you're
And then
good.
I'm trying to, man. And then from the video production house, you then went to work at a separate studio, and then that was with your friend and mentor John, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah,
And then from there, that ended, and then you started your own, which is, as we now know, in '09, founded Slagle Design,
that's
and
correct.
as we know
Yep.
it.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you could kind of like tell the real version of the story, like I know I gave like the basic highlights, but just fill in as
Sure.
many gaps. Tell us all about you and how awesome you are, and yeah, go ahead.
So, to go back to what you were saying at the beginning, my education did happen during school age.
Mhm.
I, from like the youngest age, from the earliest age, my mom noticed that I love to draw, and she really fostered that. My parents fostered that in me quite a bit. Um, and so it was something I loved to do. It was something you couldn't stop me from doing. And I had no idea that there would actually be a career. Like it always was a hobby for me, and it was always something I just loved to do. But it wasn't until high school that I found out that there was a thing called graphic design. Like I just thought everyone called me an artist. Jeremy's an artist. He's artsy. He likes to do art. I don't really think of graphic design as art. I can see why some people do. I look at it very differently than art. Art's something that you create and you put in a museum and you hope somebody in a gallery or something like that, and you hope somebody buys it. Um, my job is not to create art and hope somebody likes it. I have to like first be very intentional about figuring out what the needs of the client is first, and then make that my highest priority as I design something for them specifically. So, there's a lot more strategy behind it. It's not about using pretty colors, although there are colors involved. It's really about doing what's best for my client from a strategy. And a lot of that means sometimes like putting away what I would like to do. It may not be like the direction I would necessarily go if there were no restrictions, but I actually work really well within the confines of restrictions. So if you go back to like middle school, I was really involved in my church's youth group. We lived in San Diego at the time, and our youth pastor kind of noticed that I was just a little bit of an odd kid. I didn't really quite fit in. I always looked like I was about 8 years younger than I actually was. I was like that kid in high school that everyone's like, why are there middle schoolers hanging out? It's like, no, he's a senior. That was me. I didn't grow and actually look my age till I was like well into 18, 20 years old. I was well out of high school before I actually grew. And I think he knew that I had a love for art. And so the youth group we were in was super, super active. Like they would just pack our summer full of really great activities. And in our youth room, we had like a dedicated room at the church we grew up at, and they put banners on like rolled out butcher paper, and they went all the way around, and it had every event for the entire summer all the way around. And they had these cool, like they were bucket marker paints. They were like each color had like a bucket, and then it had two different sizes of markers that would fit inside, and you just kind of stick it in there, dip it in that paint, and you would draw. And so like I would do all these cool drawings. And the cool thing is that the guy that was actually my middle school youth pastor was an amazing illustrator himself. Like he was very, 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 very talented. And yet he would allow me as a middle schooler to make these banners. And for me to kind of like stand among my peers on a Sunday morning, and them see all the banners and be like, you did that. That's so cool. Like that just really encouraged me to do what I do. And then when I got to high school, I did everything from I redesigned our athletic mascot at my high school, which is funny because like a few years later, after John and I were running our business, we got to redesign it. And then like 2 years ago, we redesigned it again. So like I've designed that school's mascot 3 times now.
Yeah.
I especially love doing athletic mascots because it involves illustration and graphic design and branding all kind of in one thing, but also, being raised by a basketball coach, being around sports my entire life. I mean, I remember my dad would bring me in with the coaches to like pick out uniforms. Like, should we get the red letters with the black trim on it, or should we get the black letters with the yellow trim on it? It's like, I was kind of, they even at a young age, people kind of recognized that I had the ability to kind of see things, as far as that went. So yeah, so high school, I was in yearbook staff. My senior year, there's just illustrations all the way through it that I did. That's just kind of what I got, what encouraged me to do what I do. But probably the biggest thing is that I was really involved in theater. So I did every play I could get in and help build the set. I'd stay after practice and I would stay till, well after dark, helping build and paint the set, which actually probably enjoyed more than I liked actually acting in it.
Yeah. Did you do all that, like by yourself?
So no, the play director just, he loved having help. I mean, it was a small school. We didn't even really have a theater. So like we would have to erect an entire stage and build the set on top of it. And then when the show was over, we had to take the entire set down, take the whole stage apart. It was a big ordeal, but I learned a lot. I used to when I lived in San Diego, I did community theater and took classes, like professional level classes on set building, which just, I love doing. So both my kids did theater. Last week I was in New York City with my daughter. We saw a couple plays on Broadway. So theater's just always been something I've really enjoyed. But what was cool was, when you do a play, you have a playbill, you have the posters you put up around school to get, to encourage students and their families to come. You have, the sweatshirts and the t-shirts that the cast wears around to get people to come. And so I always had the opportunity to kind of create custom art for that. So I would design the t-shirt. I was in the play. I designed the t-shirt for the play. And then I started learning I started working with a local screen printer to get those things printed. And she basically invested a ton of time in me as well. She basically was like, okay, thanks for bringing me these files. It's going to take me like an hour to get these files to a place where I can actually do something with them, because you have no idea how spot colors work or Pantone colors work or trapping or overprinting. And so she's like, can I teach you how to do this? And so I sit there and she'd show me how to do it. And I learned as a high schooler, how to separate files, how to create halftone screens, like all that stuff. And it was great for her too, because I could deliver files that were ready to go. So a few years later, I was at Columbus State. Like, we didn't have a lot of money growing up. So I was trying to save what little bit of money I had to put towards college, to really kind of put it in wherever I was going to go to design school. So I got accepted at what's now the Modern College of Design in Kettering, Ohio. Was called the School of Advertising Art at the time. Yeah. And I was planning on going there. In fact, I had actually found a place to stay and moved all my stuff out there that summer. Ended up getting a job. And I just went in and interviewed, because you're right, I was working at a bakery at the time. I was working at a bakery and designing their bread calendars. So if you're not familiar with what a bread calendar is, it basically was something that they would take when they put it in every bag or order, and it would tell them like, when is cranberry going to be when are we going to be baking this? When are we going to be baking the chocolate chip, whatever. So I started doing those, and I was working in, on the computer, creating that stuff. Okay. And so I basically, my dad used to try to find odd jobs during the summer to kind of help pay the bills. And sometimes he'd be painting, sometimes he'd be working, odd jobs and landscaping, whatever he needed to do. And he saw that there was like this local t-shirt company was looking for a designer. And he's like, you should go in and interview. Like, what can it hurt? So I put together a quick portfolio of all the stuff I'd done for theater and went in and interviewed. And they called me back the next day and they're like, you got this job if you want it. So the intention at that time was that summer was going to be my summer. And then at the end of the summer, there was going to be a clean break. I was going to go off to School of Advertising Art. Well, 2.5 months later, working on the job, the guy that had hired me, who poured so much into me, and I still, like, he ended up being like a groomsman in my wedding. He had that kind of a impact on me. He basically was like, "Hey, I just been thinking. I don't want to like talk you out of what God has for you. I don't want to talk you out of, what plans you've made with your parents or what have you. But I'm just letting you know, like, if you go to design school, you're going to be the kid that's teaching everybody else in class. Like, you're so far ahead. You're going to be so bored, like learning how to use Illustrator in a classroom for people who've never used Illustrator before. And you're like surpassing me in some ways at this point."
Right.
So yeah, so basically did a lot of praying about it. I went to some other designers and illustrators that I really care about in Columbus. It'd kind of be like me being in your shoes and reaching out to me and saying, "Hey, can you look at my portfolio? Here's my situation. I've already got a job. I'm growing like crazy. What do you think?" And every single one of them gave me the same advice, and that was, you can always go back to school, but this job may not always be available for you when you come back. So I just was like, okay, let's just take this a year at a time and see what happens. And then ended up never going back. And like you said, I went from there to work for agencies in video and film and interactive. I've kind of run the whole gamut as far as like all the opportunities that are out there for designers, from UI UX side to broadcast graphics for film and video, to packaging and brand identity. And I've worked with clients on like all over the spectrum. Continue to work on athletic mascots and and design for universities, and I also do a lot of stuff for retail, a ton of food and beverage. I work with a lot of breweries. So yeah, that's kind of it in a nutshell.
Yeah, thank you for that. I mean, you definitely filled in a lot of the gaps I had there for sure. But the way I first encountered your work was through your work with Cedarville. And that logo has just always been in my mind. My sister actually went there.
Okay.
And it's a funny story because I had heard about you separately. I didn't even know that you did anything for Cedarville. And I made a collage for my sister. I think I was a freshman in high school, the first time I'd ever used Illustrator. And I made her a collage of like all the things she liked. Like I had Chipotle, the dog, Cheetos, all these random weird logos. I do the Cedarville logo. So that logo kind of has like a light bulb spot in my head. And so yeah, that's what first brought me to you. But something that you kind of mentioned briefly there that I know we don't have a ton of time because I'm actually on my lunch break right now. But something that I've heard you talk a lot about, and something that's really important to you is you seem like, you seem like a very self-aware person. Like, and I'm not a huge fan of the term like work-life balance, and you seem to be very aware of yourself and what's important to you. And I think something that I'm trying to embody kind of, and for all the young creatives that are listening, like something, if you know who you are, then it's hard to make a bad decision because you can align kind of your core values to decisions that come up. And, recently I've had a lot of bigger life decisions that I've struggled with, like, and, there's the opportunity cost, there's the cost to inaction. And can you kind of speak to a little bit about, how you settled on your priorities of family and design and how you use that to make choices that are hard sometimes?
Yeah. I think I think that these are the kinds of things that change as you get older, as you have other responsibilities, as you get married and you have a kid, and now you have a mortgage payment and you're paying for all their benefits and everything that comes along with all of that. So, when I was 22 years old, when I was your age, see, I got married when I was 24. So, dating my wife at the time, and I worked for that video and film house at that moment, and I worked crazy hours. If they needed me to work on a Friday night, I'd be like, babe, I can't go out on a date tonight. I know we had plans. They need me to stay and work. Didn't get paid or compensated for the extra hours. If I had to work on a weekend, occasionally I had to work a weekend. And I don't look back at that and say I had a bad work-life balance, because I didn't, my life was not as complex as it is today. It was weighted a lot more towards trying to figure out my career, trying to learn as much as I possibly could. And I looked at it as every project I do is something more to learn. And it's something more to kind of add to my quiver as I continue to move forward. So, I have two kids that are both, I have a 21-year-old son, and I have an 18-year-old daughter, both full-time graphic designers now. My son did the 2-year at Columbus State and got hired. First job interview, he went in, showed his portfolio, they hired him full-time. My daughter has 1 year at Columbus State, and she was about ready to start her second year this fall. And the company my son works for basically said, hey, we have a job opening. You think Faith would be interested? So they just brought Faith on. So she's not even going to worry about school next year. She's done.
It's like you.
Yeah, exactly. And, they have nights where they work late. Their boss is really great. Sometimes, if they're slower, they'll let them off a little early. And they're flexible when they need to, which is good. But I'm also constantly encouraging them at their age, like, you're going to work more hours right now. It's part of the thing, like lack of flexibility. But the goal would be that as you start taking on other obligations, as you start bringing on all those other things, that you're far enough in your career that you can start making demands is not the right, it sounds harsh to me, but you get to be more picky and choose, be more, specific about what you're willing to do and what you're not willing to do when you go into a job interview.
Mm-hmm.
When you're 18 or 21 and you're coming right out of college, they're just going to be like, we own you. And that's just kind of the way it is. When you're 40 years old and you've got a family, you can go in and say, hey, I'm willing to work here, but my family is more important to me. I need to be off at 5 o'clock. And I understand every once in a while, something's going to have to give. I'm willing to do that. But, I went into several job interviews, basically saying that, like, you're not going to get the best me if you're working me 80 hours a week. It's not going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And I just like people to know that up front, because it's like, So yeah, I mean, it changes as life changes. I've been so blessed. I've been so fortunate to be able to run my own studio, and I don't do any self-promotion. I've got a website. I'm really bad at social media. I'm really bad at it. I'm just so busy with work, and I guess that's a good problem to have. But I've been so blessed to not have to go out and try to find work. God might change that in 6 months. Like, this may completely dry up. I don't know. I have no expectations. I have no 5-year plan. I have no goals I'm trying to reach. Like next year, I'm going to try to get 20% more. I just don't. I feel like I'm super blessed to be able to do what I'm able to do even right now with where I am. So like, if this is how it is the rest of my life, I'm thrilled. So, I trust God with all of it. And I wish I could say that it's some sort of confidence that I have. It wasn't that way when I first started my business. You could ask my wife. I would see me routinely curled up in the fetal position, rocking back and forth in the corner, wondering what's going to happen next. And she just was constantly reassuring me, God is good. He's the provider. You are not. All you can do is step through any open doors that become available and open to you, and allow him to close the ones he doesn't want you to have. Just have your hands open and just be willing to trust God for everything. And I can just say that that's worked for me. You know, I can't speak for anybody else. But that's worked for me. So.
Yeah, that's powerful. I think, I've had times in my life where, I've struggled with a sense of direction. And I think, and I'm 22 years old, I'm always learning. And I ended up going to college for something that I wasn't designed. It was strength conditioning. And I had always kind of had that creative thread. Like, I hear a lot of similarities with you. Like, I I have filled probably 7 or 8 journals growing up, something I always did. I would always draw. Um, I got a lot of affirmation from that in high school. And like, I designed shirts for high school events and sporting and stuff like that, posters, advertisements and everything. And I think the thing that comes through very clearly when I listen to you is that, you have that self-awareness, and you know what you're working for. And when you say you haven't worked, you never work late. I'm not to put words in your mouth. I know I'm sure you work late nights sometimes, but like, that the best part of your day is, what comes after work. It's just spending time with your family. And
Yeah.
and I think that's really powerful. So,
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you, you said you went on a month-long international trip to, I think it was Cambodia.
Yep.
And I think reading that about you, I feel like it was a really powerful trip. Do you want to speak on that a little bit, and how like time away from design can kind of open up your eyes to new things?
Yeah. So John, who you mentioned earlier,
Mhm.
when he started an agency in 1998, and I jumped on with him, and we basically ran that company together. It started out just the two of us. And I literally got home from my honeymoon and we started that company. John's 5 years older than me, so he had been able to save up some money. So he owned the company outright. But I worked for him. We ended up running that business for 12 years through 2009. And early on, John, you could tell he wasn't fulfilled as a graphic designer and running his own agency. You could tell there was something else that was just a void. He took a short-term trip to Cambodia somebody asked him to go along, and he just was like, okay, I'll go. And he just completely fell in love with, and was completely heartbroken over the situation with children in Cambodia.
Mhm.
And so by the time 2009 came around, we were running a small design agency and like 16 orphanages in Cambodia and Thailand out of that small business.
Wow.
So
Wow.
I never got a chance to actually go, because when he would be gone, I would basically be keeping the place afloat. And so when Element closed, I got the opportunity to go and spend time there. So that's kind of the long story. But I ended up taking my family and taking my kids, ended up leading a few trips over. And I just really, really, really love the people of Cambodia.
Mhm.
It's such a great experience. So yeah, I mean, just being away, not only just being away from work, but also just like you get an understanding of what it means. Like when the Bible, for instance, talks about your daily bread, like what does that mean? We don't have any understanding for that. Like for us, we go to Costco and we buy the 4-loaf pack. We put it in the freezer and we use it as we need or whatever, or we buy like that giant thing of chicken wings. But in Cambodia, you go to the market every morning, you buy fresh meat because you don't have a refrigerator. You eat whatever you have that day, and you don't buy any extra because you don't want it to go to waste.
Mhm.
The money that you made today is the money that you have so that you can afford to buy the food for tomorrow. And then tomorrow you work for the money to pay for the food that you buy the next day.
Mm-hmm.
And so like it just completely changed in many ways my perspective on what real needs are. And as Westerners and Americans, we can't possibly comprehend.
Right.
So it kind of reset a lot of things for me. And so just coming back to work and kind of looking at like my business, looking at my clients, looking at all that stuff, it just kind of like changed the paradigm through which I saw my work. It's kind of a bit of a wake up call. So
was there ever a time when you kind of felt like, and I know this sounds like a really like stereotypical question, but was there ever a time that you felt like design was more of a job than it was something that you had to do? I know it is your job, but I've seen you talk a lot about kind of your process about, especially when you're doing like a branding project or a brand identity. Like I heard you tell a story about how you would take clients, like you would hang out with them all day at Whole Foods and really get to take them around, have breakfast with them, coffee, break bread, and see how they interact with the store, the environment around them, how they hold packaging. Was there ever a time when you didn't go to, and you were very open, like that's kind of a prerequisite to working with me. Like we're going to do this the right way. Was there ever a time when you didn't do that, and what convinced you to go all into every project that you do?
Yeah, I as crazy as it sounds, I'm actually working with one right now. We got into the process and they're just like, yeah, we're not interested. Even after I explained to them what my process is and how it works best. We got into contract. I got, into the project, and they've just been too busy to do it. So I hope when I present concepts to them that we're on the same page. I hope that it doesn't end up being an issue. But there is a way that works best. And honestly, I kind of feel like when people don't respect that, it's kind of usually a red flag for me that they don't respect the process or even just like what they're paying me to do. So yeah, I mean, in this specific project I'm talking about, I didn't know that this was going to be a problem. I probably wouldn't have taken the job. So I've just had to be very, very blunt and specific to say, like, you hired me because you see all these results for all this other stuff, and you've talked with other people that I've worked with. I'll do my best, but I can't guarantee the same results if you're not going to give me access to you. So yeah. I mean, it happens sometimes, and it's terrifying. I hate it. I hate it when that happens. And yeah, I wish I could say that it's always perfect. I would say that when I wake up every morning, 50% of what I do feels like a job, and the other 50% feels like creativity. But when you run your own business, you have to do invoices, and you have to write contracts, and you have to send out proposals, and you have to do meetings for projects that you may never get. And you have to do research, and you have to pull all sorts of stuff together it's just not part of what you consider fun graphic design stuff. Right. So yeah, so I think I've just kind of lowered my expectations to a certain extent. But when you're working for yourself, it makes it a lot easier than when you're working for somebody else who's making all the profit. You kind of go, well, I know this is kind of annoying to have to do, but at least I'm the one that's profiting from it at the end of the day. And it's
right.
So
yeah. And I've heard you say before that if you're going to work whatever 60, 80 hours a week, you might as well do it for yourself. And I've also heard you kind of break down in the past, if you're working for an employer that is making off of your projects 100 to 150 an hour, if you can make projects happen for yourself that are meaningful, that also are even less than that, but if you can shortchange that, then you can kind of make you said it was kind of like a light bulb moment when you can kind of make the connection where you can do this on your own. And was that empowering for you when you started on your own, or was it? I'm sure it was pretty scary as well.
Oh, it's terrifying. It's horrifying. I just, if you ever want to kind of know where you are, take your salary, divide it by 2,000. That's approximately your hourly rate. The question is how many, if you could bill what it's not likely, especially when you first start out, that you'll be able to invoice clients the same amount as what your agency is charging. They have loads of overhead. They're going to be higher. But even if you could charge half or 2/3 of that, how many hours would you have to work in order to make your current salary? I'm not a mathlete, but I figured mine ended up coming in around $20, $30 an hour, and now I invoice $150 an hour. So that means that I could do, what is that? It would be 5 hours of work for every 1 hour before. So that would mean that I could technically, in a 5-hour work week, invoice for 1 day a week and make what I was making before.
Right.
So then what happens if you go, but what if I can invoice for 2 billable days a week? Well, now you just doubled your salary. What if I could invoice for like 3 days a week? You just tripled your salary.
Yeah.
So, it's not, there's obviously more to it than that. Like you have other business expenses and now you're paying for your own benefits. And so it's not exactly a one-to-one, but it's a starting point to start making you think about like, I don't have to work 40 hours a week to make the amount of money I'm working right now, where my boss might be keeping me 50 hours a week.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So,
and that's, and I don't think I have like the life experience and to be able to like wrap my head around that and appreciate it fully, but it's to conceptualize it. I can see what you're talking about. And that's something I think we can all kind of work towards. But something that I've learned from your work that I really wanted to tell you about today was that to not worry so much about the money side of things, but to focus on loving people through your work. And then if you do that right and you do the process right and you show love through your work, then the money will find its way. And if you have faith, then the money will kind of find its way into the picture. But something that a lot of the other team wanted me to ask you was if you had ever done any cold outreach, like because it's the big thing, nowadays, a lot of people that are looking for work, that are looking for clients, that are looking to kind of get their foot in the industry, everyone says to, find a company you want to work with, show how you can add value to them. And then you make a proposal that they can't refuse.
right.
And to me, like, it sounds very salesy, and I'm not a salesy person. I feel very uncomfortable in that situation. Is there any advice you would give to, people that are getting started, that are younger, that they want to find work, how to do that without like coming across as salesy?
When you say get work, do you mean like freelance type work, or do you mean, okay, so not like trying to get a full-time job with that company?
For freelance or maybe part-time agency work.
Sure. I think the most important thing you can do is get your work on the internet and create a desire for somebody to want to work with you. I think there's a difference between selling somebody something and making yourself so attractive that what you do so attractive that they have to work with you. That's a totally different thing. So have a website. Start with a website. So many people start with Instagram. Stop it with the Instagram. Start with a website. Start putting stuff on Behance. Start putting some stuff on Dribbble. Agencies are looking at Dribbble. They're looking at Behance to hire people. Then start working your Instagram. The problem is that Instagram, you're most likely to be followed by other designers who do the same thing you do. They're not looking to hire you. They're looking at your work and going, that's cool. And they're liking it. Right. So it's not to say that you don't get work from Instagram. I got a big project from Adobe last year because I tagged Adobe on a project that I did because I used Illustrator, and then they have hiring me to do a project, which was really cool.
Yeah, that's awesome. I saw, not to cut you off, but I saw the first the first content of yours that I ever got exposed to was the live stream you did with Adobe when you designed the aviator logo.
Okay.
2 or 3 years ago, something like that.
Yeah. I don't know if you saw the recent boot camps I did this spring. Check those out, because those were, talk about being nervous, man. When Adobe says you have control of our live stream for 3 hours this week, and we're just going to say go, and you're live, you can ask my wife, that was one of the most nerve-wracking, scary things I've ever gone through in my life.
I can't imagine.
And that first one, Zoom would not work. And so I was supposed to be live. It's 5 minutes into the show and we could not, I'm on with the producer at Adobe and I'm like, dead space, can't get Zoom to work. It keeps trying to run an update and it just keeps failing to run the update.
So what I was just feeling times like a million probably.
Oh, it was horrible. I mean, I'm 49 years old. I've been doing this for a long time. I was already I had my notes prepared. I had all my documents that I was going to show and walk everybody through. I had practiced it 50 times because I wanted to make sure it's going to fill an hour and I'm not going to be 15, 20 minutes left and be like, oh crap, what do I do now? I'm on live,
Right.
with in front of people from all around the world watching this. So, but I learned a lot from it. That's the other thing I'll tell you is just because something's scary doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. In fact, you probably should do it. I mean, Cedarville, when I started out on my own, they contacted me within weeks and they said, we want you to come out and speak to all of our fine art and design students. We're going to fill a big, room and we're going to have you come and present your work. And I was like, crap, I do not want to do that. But I was like, no, I need to do that. This is an open door. God's telling me you should do this. So I did it. And now I spoke at my all-time favorite conference, just this spring for Creative South. If you ever have a chance to go to Creative South, it is the best.
And you're speaking at Circles.
I'm at Circles. Yeah. Next month. And then in October, I'm speaking at UCDA, the University and College Design Association conference in Atlanta. Mm-hmm. And I've slated to go and talk with some people at some colleges. Since I spoke at Creative South, a bunch of people that were from in Florida and South Carolina at different universities were like, we want to have you come in the fall and speak to our students. So probably have a few more things lined up for this next school year, but what terrified me is now one of my favorite things to do. I still get nervous when I get up on stage, but it gets a little bit better every time, but I love it. Absolutely love it. So
that's awesome. And that was kind of me, just starting this podcast, trying to reach out to people I admire and wanting to talk to. I am not a good speaker at all. I grew up, I have hearing aids, you can't tell, but
okay.
I had to take speech therapy growing up. I had a ton of social anxiety. And so I was always a really reserved person. I think I kind of expressed that through art, and that kind of led me to where I was. And I really resonated with what you said about if it's uncomfortable, then it's probably something you should do, because those are the places where I've grown the most. And naturally, I think me for sure, if I don't keep a conscious tab on what I do during the day, and if I'm not kind of pushing myself, and I don't kind of feel that nervous energy, I feel like I'm not headed in the right direction. So thank you for that. And though I really don't want to end it here, because this I really want to talk to you for a longer time, but I'm sure I'm over my lunch break. So, dude, thank you so much for your time. Seriously,
of course.
I hope you feel like your time was valued today.
Absolutely.
I can't express, just a simple thank you, I guess will do, but I really admire your work, the way you treat others, and, just making the time today really means a lot to me. So
cool.
Can people, learn more about you if they want to find out about what you do?
Go to my website. It's at slagledesign.com. That's SLAGLE design.com. And then it's got the links to my other stuff on there if you want to follow me in different places. That's the best place to kind of see my work.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'll definitely look into those. And like I said, man, I super appreciate your time.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah, you're the man. I appreciate you.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, man. Have a good day.